Eating Jelly Beans. This is Jewelry Jelly here with Molly and George Washing Machine. And I hope everybody had a great weekend. I certainly did. I managed to get a lot of stuff done. We put up the Christmas tree earlier today, and I actually had to buy a new one because the one that I had that was pre-lit, I had brought with me from when I was living by myself to the house that my husband and I bought a while back. So it finally gave up the ghost, so I bought a new one. It has lights already on there. We put it up, we put the skirt on, we put all of the ornaments on. I bought a new ornament for it. It's Goku. He looks really weird. But anyway, so I am still trying to figure out what I'm going to play for Kusoge month. I have a couple of distinct possibilities in mind, but somebody told me that I need to get done with this first, so let's do it, shall we? Your Honor, the the prosecution, I would like the right to cross-examine this witness. Bailiff, please arrest Mr. Cuthbert. I am holding him in contempt of court. Oh, wait! You didn't really think this through, did you? Instead of following his orders, the bailiff walks over to the judge's podium and whispers something into his ear. What? I see. Very well, then. What are they saying? It appears that Ms. Steelwind has somehow predicted that this would happen. In accordance with her wishes, Mr. Cuthbert may act as the prosecutor in her stead. What the hell? You can't be serious! I am honestly just as surprised as you are, Ms. Tamora. But Ms. Steelwind has apparently designated him as her stand-in. It's unorthodox, but it's also legal. You recall something strange Steelwind asked you earlier today. So, what would you do if one of your clients was guilty? So that's why she asked it. I suppose I'd withdraw and tell them to find another lawyer. And if no one else would represent them? I don't know. It would definitely be a hard choice for me. But I would never be able to represent them if I knew the truth. I just can't stand by and let a murderer escape justice. I see. Steelwind, did she somehow know this would happen? Well, this isn't how I expected the trial to go. Shortly after you barged onto the prosecutor's table, Celeste awkwardly followed behind you. Curiously, she only did so after the bailiff didn't arrest you. I guess we're really doing this. What's wrong? This feels weird. We're on the other side of the courtroom. I mean, this is where the prosecutor is supposed to stand. No, this feels way too jarring. Ruby, can we switch tables? What? Please ignore her. No, this is way too weird. Tyrion, get her to switch with us. Celeste, for the love of... I genuinely do not care. Cuthbert can have this side if he wants it so badly. With that out of the way, let's resume proceedings. Assuming that we're all at our preferred spots. We are, Your Honor. As much as you hate to admit it, you are more comfortable here. Not that you want to encourage her. With all of these interruptions, I think it best to review the proceedings up until now. The prosecution proposed that Beatrice Frega's motive for the murder was to claim the victim's inheritance. However, the defense brought forth a witness who testified that Beatrice was disinherited by her father 5 years ago. Am I correct, Ms. Tamora? You are, Your Honor. Very well. Considering the circumstances, I think it's best to have Lady Frega repeat her testimony. Bailiff, please escort Lady Frega to the stand once more. Ms. Frega, could you please give your testimony to the court once more? Of course. One day, we all woke up and discovered that Beatrice had fled from our home. She left a note for us, and in it, she renounced her name and denounced my father. My father later called me and my sister into his study. He told us that he'd completely disowned Beatrice and removed any claim she had to the Frege estate. It was probably a threat to us in case we ever chose to get on the same path she did. He wanted to make an example out of her. This all happened 5 years ago. So your father disinherited Beatrice shortly after her departure? Yes, he did. As such, Beatrice would have no motive to murder her father. Any inheritance she could have received would be long gone by the night of the murder. Is that really true, though? It's not.
Objection!
Miss Frege, it's clear that you're regretful of how your eldest sister was treated. That guilt must have eaten at you for all of these years. Cuthbert, I know you don't have a good history with the witness, but you shouldn't rub salt in her wounds. I was merely pointing out the witness's personal connection to the defendant, Ms. Tamora. She clearly regrets not standing up for her sister all those years ago. So perhaps she's trying to make up for that. By lying to protect her. Excuse me, I did nothing of the sort. Ms. Frege, you testified that your father disinherited Beatrice 5 years ago. However, I have testimony from another witness who spoke with the victim on the night of the murder. After Beatrice's meeting with William Frege, he openly declared that he would be removing her from his will. He even entered his study to draft a new will to reflect that decision. So that raises the following question. Why would the victim need to declare that he was disinheriting the defendant? Oh, excuse me. It doesn't make sense if he had already disinherited her 5 years ago. Is that so? Well, who did you hear this from? It's clear that they had no understanding of my father's estate. They had no understanding? Miriam, this testimony came directly from your sister, Leifa Frege. What? And she should have also been present during this alleged meeting 5 years ago. Well, she must be mistaken then.
Objection!
Your Honor, how can we trust second-hand testimony from a witness who isn't here? Wouldn't it make more sense to have Leifa give her testimony directly? I must agree with you, Ms. Tamora. Leifa Frege should be allowed to clear up this misunderstanding. She looks way too confident. What is she planning? You're not sure if it was intentional, but Miriam's testimony was false. Could she be lying to protect Beatrice? And if so, is Ms. Tamora expecting Leifa to do the same? Bailiff, please escort Leifa Frege to the stand. Ms. Frege, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that your father decided to disinherit Beatrice. And he decided this after their meeting on the night of the murder. Is that correct? Yes, I did say that. You see, Leifa, Cuthbert doubts the testimony given by your younger sister. He seems to think that she's committed perjury. What? I wouldn't go so far as to say, witness, lying under oath is a serious crime. It would have harsh consequences, even for someone of your sister's status. No, she couldn't have. Wonderful. Are you saying that you can corroborate your sister's testimony? Ms. Tamora, you can't just intimidate the witness. I have no idea what you're talking about, Cuthbert. I'm just telling the witness what may or may not happen depending on what she does next. The choice is ultimately hers. So, Leifa, assuming Miriam wasn't lying under oath, could you please testify to the court to confirm what your sister said? Yes, of course. You see, Miriam was quite young when my father called us into his study 5 years ago. She didn't understand what he was really doing. My father would often lie to us. It was one of the many ways that he kept us in line. The encounter that Miriam described was just another one of his lies. Despite their disagreements, my father would never disinherit Beatrice without a good reason. He always held on to the possibility that she would become desperate enough to return home. The truth is that none of us knew what my father was planning for House Frege's future. See, Cuthbert? The truth is much more complicated. No one could have really known what William Frege was planning for his estate. Leifa is definitely trying to cover for Miriam, and Ms. Tamora is playing her like a fiddle. Luckily for you, she's not the only person that gave her statement to you. Oh yeah.
Objection!
Ms. Frege, did you really have no idea about House Frege's future? No, I didn't. My father made sure of that. As I told you, he kept many secrets and wasn't above lying to manipulate us. But with Beatrice gone, you would have been the one to inherit your father's estate. Would you really be ignorant of your father's plans for House Frege? Unfortunately for you, I don't think you'd be that careless. In fact, I have it on good authority that you know exactly how William's inheritance would be divided before that night. What? Lefa, according to Lloyd von Sanctus, you were arranged into a diplomatic marriage with his son. You expressed resistance to this arrangement, am I correct? I have no reason to comment on that matter. Cuthbert, the witness's personal matters are hardly any of our business. Yes, I must ask that you keep this discussion relevant to the case. Your Honor, Lefa's resistance to this marriage is exactly how I know that her testimony is false. She was extremely averse to this marriage, and because of that, she made sure to know every detail about how it would affect her and her house. And that includes how House Frege would be inherited by her future husband. So that raises the question, Lefa. If you already knew the intricate details of this marriage, why would your father tell you that he was disinheriting your sister? That statement would only make sense if Beatrice was already in his will beforehand. That would render Miriam's testimony false and constitute a motive for the defendant.
Objection!
You present a decent argument, Cuthbert, but your claims rely on one assumption. And what assumption would that be, Ms. Tamora? Even if he was lying, the victim declared that he was revoking Beatrice's inheritance. She must have already been named in the will previously, otherwise there would have been no need for him to say that. It wouldn't make any sense otherwise. And that's where your assumption is. You're assuming that William Frege was acting logically. What are you talking about? It's clear that William Frege was extremely controlling of his daughters. By your own admission, Lefa Frege was resistant to the marriage arranged by her father. In addition to that, Miriam Frege found herself wrapped in controversy regarding the Nightgrave trial a few months ago. And finally, to make matters worse, Beatrice Frege, the prodigal child, finally returned and made a public appearance during the Lord's ball. What are you trying to insinuate? In his eyes, William Frege's ability to keep his daughters in line was clearly weakening. He must have gotten desperate and made a grand declaration in a feeble attempt to scare you, Lefa. Even if that declaration was clearly inconsistent. But he wouldn't. Your ability to remember must be muddled by the shock of your father's death. His statement couldn't have possibly been true. If by some chance it were true, that would make you guilty of perjury. Or perhaps it was Miriam that was lying in her testimony. If your father's statement were true, the court might be inclined to investigate her for lying on the stand. Oh. Ms. Tamora, are you threatening her? As I said before, I am merely stating the facts. The witness is free to act as she sees fit. I'm just asking her to consider the potential consequences of what she says next. What do I do? Damn it. She's pressuring Lefa to side with her. She's clearly conflicted, though. Isn't there anything you can do? You feel a sense of clarity when you look at her. Is the Eye of Horus reacting to her stress? You wonder. I'm sorry. I need time to think. Please, don't stare at me like that, Mr. Cuthbert. Wait a minute. No, wait! It's too late.
Naught can remain concealed.
The Empowered Eye. You did it. You activated the Empowered Eye. There has to be something in her mind that you can use. The state of her father's inheritance is the backbone of your case. Is there anything in her mind that can definitively prove what was on his will? As As much as I hate to admit it, this trial is a perfect opportunity to back out of the arranged marriage. Von Sanctus's holdings are weakening by the day. I doubt he'll be able to put up much resistance. And once Beatrice inherits the estate, we might be able to rebuild our family. She's assuming that Beatrice will inherit House Frege. That confidence must mean that she's certain of what was in William's will. But how do you prove that? Illusion magic. Father, I know we had our differences, but I did love you, and I never wanted you to die. She seems genuinely surprised and regretful about his death. From your encounter earlier, you know that Beatrice had an accomplice, but you doubt that it was Leifa. Why would Miriam say those things? Am I misremembering what happened? No, I would have remembered something like that. She must be trying to protect Beatrice. So Miriam's testimony was a conscious lie. Beatrice's inheritance wasn't revoked until the night of the murder. Ruby Tamora. I've heard stories about her. I never expected Beatrice to hire someone like her. I wonder if she'll be at the will reading tomorrow. A will reading? She must be talking about William Frege's will. I believe you've had enough time for deliberation, Mr. Cuthbert. Are you able to prove the defendant's motive or not? I'm not, Your Honor. At least, not yet. It's clear we won't get anywhere until we can confirm the state of William Frege's will. And we can easily confirm that tomorrow morning, when William Frege's will is read to his family. How did you... I see. Once his will is read, it will become public record. I suppose I have no choice but to suspend this trial until such time that William Frege's will is read.
Objection.
This is ludicrous. The case against my client is completely outrageous. We've spent the entire court proceedings arguing if her motive even exists. The prosecution has very little evidence that physically implicates my client. Ms. Tamora, you clearly don't believe that the defendant had anything to do with the murder. Of course I don't. She's completely innocent. Well, if your client didn't murder the victim, who did? You sneaky little... Your Honor, with no other suspects, are you in a position to pass a verdict? No, I am not. Mr. Cuthbert is correct. The court does not have enough information to pass a verdict. Until the Inquisition has time to investigate these new developments, I will be suspending today's trial. We will resume the trial tomorrow afternoon. Court is adjourned. Alright, so we got ourselves a will reading. Well, that happened. Sorry, I kind of acted without thinking. But out of everything that happened today, I can't believe that Steelwind somehow knew you would do that. Right, that is strange. Did she seriously predict what I'd do off of that one conversation? Considering how things turned out, you suppose she was right on the mark. But that was still a big leap of faith. Anyways, we have some time to ourselves. I'd very much like to catch up on some sleep. Yeah, today's been exhausting, for a lot of reasons. And your work has only started. You still have no idea who Beatrice's accomplice was. The will reading was just an opportunity to stall for time. So the question remains, who really murdered William Frege? I have a funny feeling that we already encountered the murderer. And it wasn't a person. What the hell was that? Why is your son filling in for Arya? Listen, I have the situation under control. If that's true, I'd hate to see a situation you consider out of control. Eris, my father is not pleased with today's developments. You promised that the verdict would be passed before William Frege's will became public record. This has thrown quite the wrench in our plans. I understand. Cuthbert is just confused, but he's not a threat to us. We'd better hope you're right, Tamora. Or else your poor ward might suffer the same fate as Prosecutor Steelwind. What? House Frigga is too important of a prize for us to let go. Bring us results tomorrow, or else we'll continue to take more drastic measures. Oh boy. For the first time since the Lord's Ball, you're finally able to get some sleep. You woke this morning refreshed, but also a little anxious about the results of the will reading. You arrive back at Freyga Manor and see that Beatrice, Leifa, Miriam, and von Sanctus have all gathered, along with Ms. Tamora, who is accompanying Beatrice as her attorney. You're not really sure what to say to her after everything you've done. The air still feels too awkward to approach her and talk about it. Thank you for all for coming here today. As William Freyga's close associate, I must express my deepest condolences for your loss. I think I speak for all of Wyvern when I say, enough! Just get on with it! Ahem, very well then. To get straight to the point, Lord Freyga's will was magically sealed when it was given to me. He asked me, his executor, not to submit it to the courts for probate until after his death. Although I imagine none of us expected such a time to come so suddenly. Anyways, Lord Freyga's assets included sole ownership of several banking houses throughout Wyverngard, 10 million gold in various investments. 10 million? 10 million gold? You can't even begin to imagine what anyone could do with even a fraction of that wealth. And lastly, sole control and ownership of the Freyga noble house. The executor takes out a large envelope and uses a runestone to dispel the magical seal on it. I, William Freyga, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I hereby give, devise, and bequeath all of my assets and property, both real and personal, to Jayden von Sanctus, provided that he enters into a legal and binding engagement with my daughter, Leifa Freyga, within 6 months of the date of my death. What? That's... William must have added that addendum to prevent a von Sanctus from trying to steal his empire. But a legal and binding engagement is predicated on Leifa accepting it. She clearly doesn't want to go through with it, so if she simply waited 6 months, von Sanctus wouldn't have any claim to the estate. In the event that Jayden von Sanctus does not enter into such an engagement within the specified time frame, my assets and property shall be distributed as such. All of House Freyga will be divided equally among my children as per the laws of our kingdom. You were right. William Freyga never disinherited Beatrice. This would make Miriam's testimony false. And since Beatrice would receive a portion of William's inheritance, she had a motive to commit the murder. You glance at Miriam. It's hard to read her expression, but something appears to be on her mind. Without a word, she walks out of the room, ignoring both Beatrice and Leifa. Leifa, on the other hand, seems to be in good spirits. Isn't this great, Beatrice? You can lead House Freyga now, just as it should have been. Actually, about that, in light of recent events, I believe I should clarify one thing. As per the Slayer rule, if Beatrice Freyga is found guilty in the current court case, her inheritance will be revoked and divided between you and your sister. I see. I shouldn't feel so happy for myself. That can't be all, can it? Surely William added a note of Leifa's obligation to marry my son? I'm not sure what you're trying to imply. Leifa Freyga is an adult with legal autonomy. She is free to make whatever decision she wishes about who she legally marries. Now, if you'll excuse me. Wait, we're not finished yet. Come back here. I'd love to catch up with you, Leifa, but I was only allowed out of my cell to attend the reading. You notice an Inquisition knight outside the door. He seems to be watching Beatrice intently. But don't worry, I'm sure once this misunderstanding is resolved, we can talk all we want about our family's future. Of course! A group of knights lead Beatrice out of the manor, and Leifa follows after them, leaving you and Celeste alone with Ms. Tamora. Uh-oh. About what I did? Look, I'm not angry, Cuthbert. Oh, it was an extremely unforeseen situation, and Steelwind clearly put you on the spot. You felt pressured to do something and you made a rash decision, but I'm sure the court will understand if you withdraw. Wait, what? Cuthbert, you're not a prosecutor. You know that, right? Didn't you become an attorney to defend persecuted mages? But Beatrice is guilty. I saw it. I'm not going to argue about this again. You are going to withdraw. This is not up for discussion. You've always regarded and respected Ms. Tamora, and you suppose that's always made you deeply scared of disappointing her. Perhaps she's right. She knows more about what's going on than you do, and she's still your mentor. You want to believe that. You really do. But deep down, you know that this is wrong. Ms. Tamora may believe in Beatrice's innocence, but you can't just abandon this case and let her escape justice. Your hands are trembling. Why are you so scared right now? You know what you have to say, but the words don't leave your mouth. From behind you, you feel Celeste hold your trembling hand. It's warm and comforting. It's that same sensation you felt back then. Somehow, you can feel it through her hand. It's as if she's silently telling you that you know what you have to do. Your anxiety fades, and you take a deep breath. I'm not going to do that, Ms. Tamora. What? You said it yourself. Our court system needs a defense attorney and a prosecutor of equal power to keep things fair. That's not what... I'm not going to withdraw. If you believe in Beatrice's innocence, and if you truly believe you're on the right side, then prove it by beating me. Fine, do what you want, but you're only going to make things harder for everyone. Tyrion? As soon as Miss Tamora steps out of the room, your body drops to the floor. Whatever bravery you felt before got replaced with an extreme amount of fatigue. Scaled Lord, that's the first time I've ever spoken to her like that. But you still did it. You stood your ground. Figuratively. I mean, right now, you're kind of just sitting on the floor. Yeah, I need to take a moment. Can we go back to the ballroom? You return to the ballroom and take a moment to recover. You spot Commander White at the edge of the room, but you don't pay him much notice. It takes you a while before you feel ready to stand. You okay? Yeah, I just needed a moment. Anyways, the will reading brought us a few more hours to investigate the murder. We should take advantage of the new information we just learned. So, where should we start first? Right, you're the prosecutor now, so that would technically make you his boss for the time being. This is weird, right? Yep. Awkwardness aside, I've never really led a task force before. What would Steelwood normally do in this situation? Well, she'd normally have us investigate areas of interest. Right, the context of the investigation tends to change after each round of court proceedings. Well, we're lacking a lot of physical evidence. Could you and the Inquisition search the gallery in Beatrice's room? Perhaps you can find evidence of how the Sword of Spell-Eating was stolen. Whatever you say, boss. That covers the Inquisition, but what are we going to do? It's clear that Lord Frega's inheritance plays a large role in this case. Even if it's not valid, we should take a look at the modified will that he was drafting. It might give us some insight about what he was really planning to do with his inheritance. Alright, so it looks like we're going to go back to his study. Let's see. Come on, where is it? As you enter William Frega's study, you spot a figure rummaging through the drawers in his desk. Why isn't it here? Where else would he put it? Miriam? Ah! As soon as she notices you, Miriam quickly closes the drawers and walks towards you. But you already saw what she was doing. She was definitely looking for something. This is a crime scene. What are you doing here, Miriam? As if that's any of your business. Considering that I'm the prosecutor, it's very much my business. You give a side glance to the knights stationed outside the room. They should have stopped her from entering, but perhaps she used her status to intimidate them into letting her through. However, this could be a blessing in disguise. She was clearly looking for something in this room, and you have a feeling you know what it is. You appear to be looking for something, Miriam. What could be so important that you disturb an active crime scene? It's none of your concern. I'm merely trying to find something that belongs to me. Really, because I have a feeling we might be looking for the same thing. You're looking for the will that your father was drafting, aren't you? That's... Were you trying to destroy it before we could get to it? No! Of course not! I just needed to see it for myself. Did she really do this? Oh, is she also suspicious of Beatrice? Why are you so determined to see the drafted will, Miss Frege? I just wanted to see what my father's final wishes were. But your father already had a will filed previously. Wouldn't that be enough? You also suspect something, don't you? Of course not! Beatrice would never do something like this! Miss Frege, I never even mentioned Beatrice. I know how things may look, but please understand. I'm just trying to get the truth. I don't think your sister did this, but she may have been involved. She may have worked with someone else to orchestrate her father's death. Unlike Leifa, she didn't immediately deny it. This means that she already had her own suspicions. Where is the will, Miriam? I need to see it. I don't know. I haven't been able to find it. You recall that she was frantically searching William's desk earlier. She's probably telling the truth. It should have been here, but I can't find it. He locked the door when he began drafting it. In addition to that, the Inquisition closed the area off after the body was discovered. That means that someone took it during the lockdown. On the night of the murder, William Frege retreated into his study to modify his will. He died before this will could be submitted, so it's not valid. The draft was supposedly stolen during the lockdown. It's likely that the murderer took and/or destroyed it. It was probably stolen by whoever murdered him, right? Yeah, that would make the most sense. Which means that whoever did this wanted to nullify whatever was written on it. It's looking more and more like the motive behind this was... excuse me. William's inheritance. Anyways, it looks like we won't be able to find the will, but the fact that it was taken must imply something. For now, we should follow our other leads. There's also the question of who committed the murder and how. Don't we already know the how? The murderer stole the Sword of Spell-Eating and used it to break into the study. That's true, but think about how they would have needed to move around the manor. The murder took place on the first floor, within William Frege's study. But the gallery was on the second floor. They would have needed to go upstairs, steal the sword from the gallery, and then use it to nullify the lock on the study. Not only that, they would have needed to go back upstairs and plant the sword in Beatrice's room. About that, if someone conspired with Beatrice to do this, why would they plant the sword in her room? That's a good point. Perhaps they had a falling out. Her partner might have tried to betray her by pinning the blame on her. But if that were true, why wouldn't she just sell them out and make a deal with Steelwind? It would be because of the Slayer rule. Slayer rule? I remember the guy at the will reading also mentioned that. What is it? It was a law passed by the Crown centuries ago. According to that law, if someone is involved in another person's death, even accidentally, they will not be allowed to inherit the deceased's property. Excuse me. So even if Beatrice wasn't directly responsible, she'd lose her cut of the inheritance if she took a plea deal. More importantly, it doesn't sound like Miriam completely believes in Beatrice's innocence either. If that's true, what else can she tell you? Miriam, it almost sounds like you suspect Beatrice as well. Am I incorrect? I don't know what to think anymore. Why else would she threaten me? Wait, she was threatened? Miriam, did Beatrice threaten you in some way? What? Of course not! Your testimony yesterday was quite convenient for the defense. It almost got the whole case thrown out. And Leifa didn't seem to understand what was going on either. With the way she gave her testimony yesterday, it was almost like she was covering for you. Does he seriously not know? Please, promise me that you won't tell anyone about this. I won't tell anyone. What happened? About an hour after the murder, I was approached by Ruby Tamora. She gave me a list of statements to give in my testimony. The statements weren't true, but she assured me that my status would protect me from any scrutiny. What? She had information that I had tried to keep secret, and she threatened to make it public unless I cooperated with her. No! No! She would never do that! I'm telling the truth! Please, you can't tell Tamora that I told you. She'll ruin me! The eye shows that her fear is genuine. She's not lying. I've seen that woman do all kinds of shady shit in the cases I've worked. Forgery, bribery, blackmail, you name it. I'll bet you're just the same, the successor for the devil of defense attorneys. The rumors. It can't be true. You refuse to believe it. Hey, Tyrion, are you okay? Now is not the time to doubt yourself. There's too much at stake right now, and you have a job to do. We should check on Commander White. He might have found something. Okay. Just don't push yourself, okay? Yeah. You'll have plenty of time to think about this later. As you move around the manor, you peek into the sitting room to see if Von Sanctus is still there. You don't see him there, but you spot another individual. He's calmly reading some sort of book, but you can feel a menacing aura emanating from him. Miss Aura, you must be daft if you think I wouldn't notice your presence. What? Did he notice you? You barely entered the room. Before you have a chance to respond, the man pulls out his great axe and rushes towards you. Wait, You bring up your arms to block his blow, but in hindsight, that probably won't do much against an axe that large. Protagus. You open your eyes. Celeste is now standing between you and the axe-wielding maniac. You're not sure what happened, but it looks like she knocked him several feet backwards. Oh, it's you two. What the hell was that? You could have killed him! He shouldn't have snuck up on me like that. I almost cleaved him in two. Tyrion didn't do anything wrong. Who the hell do you think you are? I am Lord Lucio Steelwind, Grand General of the Wyvern Guard Military Forces. Oh, so that's Arya's father. So this is Prosecutor Steelwind's father. They do share the same intimidating stare. Although, he's not the most menacing person in the room right now. Celeste, it's fine. I'm not hurt. She looks more than irate like right now, but she begrudgingly sheaths her sword. Anyways, Lord Steelwind was one of the people with a motive to murder William Frege, and as a fellow head of a pillar house, he might have some information about William and his affairs. I'm sorry about what happened to your daughter. I'm sure that you're very worried. It's her own fault for exerting herself despite her injuries. Even the bravest warrior knows when to stay off the battlefield. How can you say that? Your daughter was trying to do the right thing. By prosecuting the heiress of House Frege, she had very little evidence to substantiate a conviction. If she wanted to strike a blow on a rival house, she should have been certain that her enemy would fall. But now, if Beatrice Frege is found innocent, any hopes of an alliance between House Frege and House Steelwind will be completely annihilated. It's clear that he and the prosecutor have vastly different priorities. If looks could kill. McCoy, one might misinterpret that look of yours as murderous intent. Aw, guess you do have some battle instincts after all. I honestly wasn't sure, since you so obviously have a silver spoon stuck up your... Celeste! Such lack of respect and discipline. If you were one of my soldiers, I'd have you hanged. If I was one of your soldiers, I'd hang myself. Okay, I'll try to stay civil here. Lord Steelwind, you were here at the Lord's Ball when the murder occurred, am I correct? I was. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about what you saw that night? If that's okay with you. I suppose I must oblige, considering that my daughter has so unceremoniously thrust her responsibilities onto you. Where were you throughout the night, Lord Steelwind? I so loathe gatherings like that. They're a complete waste of time. I was in this room, but then I received word that Lord Frege's lost heiress had made an unexpected appearance. She was supposedly speaking with the Crown Prince, so I made my way to the ballroom. Did you speak with them at any point? No, I kept my distance and stayed near the Kingsguard. I needed to make sure she wouldn't try anything. Was this because you were wary of Beatrice Frege? Yes, I was. The Crown Prince has always been a bleeding heart, and the Freges are trained to sharpen their tongues from birth. I needed to make sure that she wouldn't try to interfere with his engagement. You were worried that she was going to try to take Aster back. I was, but it was clear that wasn't her intention. But you did overhear their conversation. What were they talking about? Their conversation was completely inane. It was all just small talk. Lady Freyga spent most of her time playing with Prince Alaric. Right, Aster's younger brother was there too. You know that Beatrice had some role in the murder, even if she wasn't directly responsible. Did she have some unknown goal by speaking with Aster and his brother? You went to the ballroom when you heard that Beatrice had returned. Was this before or after the lockdown? It was before the lockdown. That sounds about right. This means that she was accounted for before the theft was reported. And did you see her leave at any point? No, she spoke with the two princes for quite a while. She didn't leave their side until she was arrested for Lord Freyga's murder. What? That means she was accounted for the entire night. Beatrice Freyga was seen speaking with Aster de Wyverngard and Alaric de Wyverngard during the Lord's Ball. She spent the entire night speaking with them. She was also accounted for before the Sword of Spell Eating was reported missing. Lucio Steelwind, Aster, and several members of the Kingsguard can confirm this. But her thoughts said that she was accomplice in William's death. Was she there to distract the Kingsguard? Thank you for your answering our questions, Lord Steelwind. I'm merely repaying my daughter's debt to you. He was surprisingly pretty cooperative, but that doesn't lift any suspicion off of him just yet. You'll need to find more evidence if you want to know for sure. Anyways, we should probably move somewhere else. Let's go, Celeste. McCoy. What? Your spellcasting is undisciplined, but your battle stance and reflexes are commendable. You have my respect as a warrior. As if that means anything coming from you. What an undisciplined and defiant brat. Alright, so we are going to move back into the ballroom. Okay, nothing's there. Keep it in that corner. Don't let it get away. Get away from him! As you enter Beatrice's room, you see the Inquisition cornering something near the back of the room. It's some sort of animal. A wolf, to be exact. Wait, is that... You recall spotting that same wolf on the night of the Lord's Ball. Has it been in the house since the murder? Intruders must protect Queen. What? Did you just read his thoughts? Protect territory from enemies. He must see the Inquisition as intruders in his territory. But does that mean he sees this room as his home? You slowly start to walk towards him. Wait, Tyrion? Stay back, kid. It's a wild animal. There's no telling what it'll do. You ignore them and continue to approach him. Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you. Huh? This human. He can speak language of dog? Wait, you can understand me? Why are you talking to it? You're speaking plain dog. Of course. Tracker, understand. What's going on here? Is the Eye of Horus allowing you to speak with him? You've never really tried it before, but perhaps your powers aren't limited to humans. Anyways, this could be a good opportunity. You wonder what else he knows. Tracker, is that your name? How did you... Yes, Tracker is Tracker. That the name Queen give to me. Name Tracker. Occupation, dog. Tracker gestures to Leifa when he mentions his queen. He called you his queen. Do you know him, Leifa? Yes, but how? How are you talking to it? That's... You were so caught up in speaking to Tracker. You didn't realize how strange this scene must look to everyone else. I'm a dog whisperer. You've never mentioned that before. Do you honestly expect us to believe something like that? But Tracker says he can understand him. He told me himself. Wait, how do you know that? So, Leifa, how are you able to communicate with Tracker? I suppose there's no sense in hiding it anymore. Tracker is my familiar. Familiar, so it's the same magical bond Harold has with his monkey. You recall that the familial bond spell allows the caster to telepathically speak with their familiar. That must be how she's speaking to him. You never mentioned him during questioning. It wasn't relevant to the investigation, and I've been keeping him a secret from my family. I suppose that makes sense. I doubt William Freyga would have allowed you to keep an animal in his home. Well, I don't appreciate you keeping this info from us, but it doesn't look like anyone got hurt. And aside from this dog, we haven't really found anything new. Damn it, they didn't find any more physical evidence of the theft. It looks like you've run into another dead end. Unless... Tracker, I saw you on the night of the murder. What? Tracker! Retro! He's supposed to stay in this room. Wait, is that why you won't allow the servants to enter it? I didn't want to keep him in Beatrice's room, but he was very insistent that he stay here. Tracker likes the ambiance. Tracker's a goth? Right. Wait, if you live in this room, did you see who brought the sword of spell eating here? I already asked him about that, but he didn't see anyone. He must have been taking a nap. Either that or he was roaming outside, even though I told him to stay here. Aww. Damn it. Trackers see a lot of other things, though. Trackers see many new people that night. Right, he was roaming the manor during the Lord's Ball. He must have seen a lot of new people. Wait, if he was walking around, he might have seen something that the Inquisition doesn't know about. Can you tell us what you saw on the night of the murder, Tracker? Trackers see rats. This may be more difficult than you thought. I need you to be more specific. Can you go in order? Tell me about everyone that you saw that night. Okay. Tracker was taking nap in room, but Tracker woke up from loud sounds outside. Tracker hears small things running in the walls. Running in the walls? Tracker called Queen, but she didn't answer, so Tracker decided to check sound alone. Tracker follows sound outside. That's when Tracker smelled the bad smell. Bad smell? That's when Tracker smelled flying rat. You smelled a flying rat? Did you mean like a pigeon? Tracker could smell where Rat was, so Tracker borked at him. Tracker must have scared Rat because he fell onto the floor and dropped his stick. The rat had a stick? Tracker could see them now, so Tracker did one final bork to scare them off. The rats were scared and went back into the walls. It went into the walls? That's when Tracker picked up the stick Rat dropped. Queen finally answered Tracker. She told him to go back to his room and hide. After message, Tracker brings stick back to room for inspection. Do you remember what time this encounter happened? What is time? Right, an animal wouldn't really have a concept of that. What did he say, Tyrion? Did he see anything? Did Timmy fall down the well? Well, he definitely saw something. Okay, let's try to take a moment to work through this. Tracker is an animal, and despite being able to speak with him, his use of words is very primitive. So you should carefully examine each of his statements. The first thing he heard was small things running in the walls. What did Tracker hear when he woke up? You recall that someone else observed something similar that night. Tracker heard rats running in the vents. The servants were complaining about rats running through the air vents, so they sent me to take care of it. I heard one of them running in the vents upstairs, and I followed it here. I figured it had nowhere else to go, so I opened it up and put a trap down. He must have heard the rats that Jan mentioned. They weren't actually running in the walls. They were running in the vents. The next thing he did was call the Queen, but she didn't answer. Why didn't Leifa answer Tracker's message? The Queen that he's referring to is probably Leifa, but Leifa wasn't with him at the time. He must have called out to her telepathically. No, Leifa clearly didn't want Tracker to leave the room. If he contacted her, she would have said something in response. So something else must have happened. Oh! Leifa didn't respond because she never got Tracker's message. The telepathic capabilities granted by familial bond were disabled by the anti-magic field, which means that this encounter happened during the lockdown. So that covers his first two statements, but you're not really sure what to make of the flying rat he saw. Tracker, why did you refer to the rat as flying? Because rats don't usually jump and fly. Yes, I got that. Is it possible that what you saw wasn't really a rat? Rats are rats. They're small things that run and hide. I think it is the monkey doctor's idiom. So rat is a general term for him. He uses it to refer to small animals that are acting suspiciously. Anyways, with everything you know now, his last statement doesn't make sense. Why did Tracker finally hear Leifa? He said that the queen finally answered him, and this happened after he picked up the stick. Because the stick it's the anti-magic sword. But that shouldn't have been possible due to the anti-magic field. No, Leifa told Tracker to go back to his room. His attempts to contact her failed previously because of the lockdown system. But something changed that allowed him to hear her. You recall that he picked up a stick. There we go. Tracker, about that stick you found. Where did you put it after you came back to this room? Tracker hides stick in safe place, under the bed. And this stick, did it look like the sword that my friend is carrying? What? Hey, your friend stole my other stick! Wait, your other stick? Yeah, Tracker found it while he was hiding from the Metal Men. Metal Men? Is he referring to the King's Guard? He must have left the bedroom when they were searching for the Sword of Spell Eating. Wait, are you the one who stole Celeste's sword? Tracker! Did Tracker do a bad? It's as I suspected. Tracker was the one that brought the Sword of Spell Eating here. What? I have no idea how or why, but the Sword of Spell Eating was lying in a hallway somewhere. Tracker found it and brought it back to Beatrice's room. His room. That can't be. So the person who framed Beatrice for the theft was... If it weren't for Tracker, the Inquisition would have never honed in on Beatrice at all. But why would the Sword of Spell Eating be lying in a random hallway? Leifa, do you mind if I borrow Tracker for a little bit? It's okay, Queen. He smell good. Tracker, trust him. Thanks, I guess? Okay, but only if you allow me to accompany you. You know about Miriam's position, but how does Leifa feel about you prosecuting Beatrice? It's possible she might try to sabotage the investigation if you let her accompany you. But as Tracker's owner, you don't really have a choice. You nod to Leifa, but you also send a subtle gesture to Celeste to keep an eye on her. She silently nods and slowly follows behind her. Alright, Tracker, can you take us to the hallway where you found these rats? Sure thing, King! It looks like you've received a promotion. You allow Tracker to lead you to the location where he found the Sword of Spell Eating. Surprisingly, it's fairly close to Beatrice's room. He apparently didn't travel very far before he met those rats he mentioned. As you continue towards your destination, Tracker suddenly becomes extremely tense. Tracker, what's wrong? Enemy. Oh? Before you even have a chance to react, Tracker steps between you and Eris and begins angrily barking at her. Oh dear. Tracker, stop that! Leifa tries to calm Tracker down, but he's undeterred. He continues to bark at Eris, and it looks like it's taking all of Leifa's strength to hold him back. I'm terribly sorry. He's not usually like this. Oh, it's to be expected. I'm not sure why, but animals have always disliked me. What is Eris doing here? You recall seeing her at the barracks, too. She said that her father is friends with Beatrice, but is she involved in this case somehow? Anyways, you came here for a purpose. You should examine this hallway and see if you can find any clues. There's an air vent over here. It appears to go from the ceiling to the ground floor. Is this where that rat escaped to, Tracker? That's where the jumping rat went. I thought you said it was a flying rat. Tracker see that too. Okay, it would probably be better to just move on. Anyways, where did this rat come from? Rat come out the other wall. Do you mean the vent on the opposite side? Yes, Tracker saw flying rat escape that way. What was this rat doing here in the first place? These crystals supposedly generated an anti-magic field during the lockdown. However, the Sword of Spell Eating would make its wielder immune to these fields.
Repario Arcanum!
Whoa. What? What do you see? The vents have traces of illusion magic inside them. What? The traces also go deep inside these vents. It's the same for the vents on the other side, too. why would there be traces of illusion magic inside the vents? What spell could have possibly left those traces? As I told you many months ago, illusion spells tend to do one of two things. They either create freestanding illusions, or they can disguise an existing creature. I doubt someone created a small freestanding illusion in the vents, so a disguised creature must have been inside these vents at some point. But these vents are tiny. No one would be able to fit inside them. Tracker could see them now, so Tracker did one final bork to scare them off. The rats were scared and went back into the walls. But a rat would be able to fit in these vents. Well, yeah, I guess that'd be true. But that would mean that rat had an illusion spell active on it at the time. It's not only that. He said that the queen finally answered him, and this happened after he picked up a stick. But that shouldn't have been possible because of the anti-magic field. Tracker saw this rat during the lockdown. They would have been inside the anti-magic field created by the lockdown. There can only be one way that rat could have an illusion spell active on it. Wait, you can't mean... That rat was holding the sword of spell eating. Tracker's testimony. On the night of the murder, Tracker smelled something strange and followed the scent to the hallway north of Beatrice's bedroom. There he saw a flying rat come out from the northern air vent. Tracker barked at this rat and scared it away. When this happened, Rat supposedly dropped the sword of spell eating. Tracker took the sword and brought it back to Beatrice's room. What? But how is that possible? A rat wouldn't have the strength or hands to carry the sword. Tracker's vocabulary is primitive and limited. He uses the word rat to describe small creatures that hide and act suspiciously. But even if it wasn't an actual rat, it still couldn't have been a human, right? You're right. It would have been a small animal. A small animal with the strength and dexterity to traverse a small air vent while holding a sword. Sorry, but I really have to ask, is that a monkey riding on your back? Yes, this is my familiar, Eugene. No, are you serious? We know that Harold had a motive to kill William Frege. He was planning to defund the Haraldson Hall of History. They had an argument that night, and that's when William Frege decided that he was going to defund Harold's museums. He must have struck a deal with Beatrice, and with Beatrice's portion of House Frege, she could have easily kept his museums funded. He could have faked the robbery and sent his familiar to murder William. I can't believe this. And there's something else that Tracker said. Tracker could smell where Rat was, so Tracker borked at him. Tracker must have scared Rat because he fell onto the floor and dropped his stick. The rat had a stick? Tracker, you said you had to smell to see where the rat was. Invisibility spell. And when he dropped his stick, you were finally able to see him. Does this mean you couldn't visually see him before he fell down? Yeah, Tracker couldn't see the rat with his eyes, so Tracker used his nose to see it. The monkey was invisible. No one would have noticed a small invisible animal. In addition to that, he moved through the air vents. Eugene would have had been nearly undetectable that night. Beatrice is a master of illusion magic, so it's possible that she cast invisibility on Eugene. Invisibility, one of the highest forms of illusion magic. This spell makes the target creature or object completely invisible. While invisible, the target will be completely transparent and undetectable visually. If targeting a creature, this spell will also affect anything that the creature is wearing or holding. And then there's the position of this air vent. We're currently in the hallway just north of Beatrice's room, and this air vent connects to the ground floor. If we align the two floor maps together, this vent must lead to the storage room. Right, the air vent there curved upwards. This must be where it leads. And according to Jan, that air vent led directly to William's study. It would have been the perfect route to enter William's study and leave undetected. But he wouldn't have needed to nullify the lock to enter that room. Why would he need to use the sword of spell eating at all? Because of familial bond. They can telepathically communicate with each other. Harold probably needed Eugene to hold the sword so he could tell him exactly where to go. The sword's magic affects anyone magically connected to the wielder, and familial bond connects them magically. It makes sense now. Harold could have easily faked the robbery to take suspicion off of him. It's even possible that he was lying about how the display glass was shattered. But I've known Lord Haraldson for many years. I just can't believe that he'd be involved in this. She may have known Harold for a long time, but she's never read his thoughts. His thoughts were very hostile and rude, despite his kind expression. He's very good at hiding what he's truly feeling. And Beatrice, there's no way she'd participate in a plan like this. Look, Leafa, I know you don't want to suspect your sister, but it's not that. Beatrice would never trust anyone enough to work together like this. But she's completely blind. She wouldn't have much of a choice. Even so, she's not the type of person to trust her accomplice to stay quiet. She'd find a way to carry out a plan herself, and she'd only employ someone else's help if she had full control of them. Leafa probably knows her better than you do, but you doubt that working alone would be possible with her condition. And you can't think of any other way she'd be involved in this. Anyways, we're finished here, aren't we? Yes, thank you for lending Tracker to us, Leafa. I only want to help you find out what really happened. Don't make me regret trusting you, Mr. Cuthbert. If you're truly on the side of justice, then you won't. Good. Now if you'll excuse me. So that's it, right? We finally know who really committed the murder then. And if you can get Harold to confess on the stand, he might reveal Beatrice's involvement as well. If he does that, you might be able to convince her and Ms. Tamora to take a plea deal. Although, knowing Ms. Tamora, that will be easier said than done. Anyways, this is definitely the lead that we've been looking for. But is it really enough? We still don't have any physical evidence. It'll have to do for now. We're running out of time. We'll just have to call Harold to the stand to testify about what he did that night. If I can push him far enough, I might be able to catch him lying. But you doubt it will be that easy. He has a good poker face. Just how much will he be able to hide his true thoughts? I already gave my statement to the Inquisition. Is my testimony really necessary? Sorry, old-timer, my orders came straight from the prosecutor. We're going to need you on the stand today. I understand. I'll do what I can to help. Alright, so are we going to see a monkey on the stand? Court is now resumed for the trial of Beatrice Frege. Let us review yesterday's proceedings. There was much debate over William Frege's inheritance. More specifically, it was unknown whether the defendant had any claim to her father's inheritance. This detail was crucial in determining whether the defendant even had a motive to commit the murder. Luckily, the victim's will was supposedly read earlier today, and it is now part of the public record. What were the results of the will reading, Mr. Cuthbert? William Frege was planning to leave all of his assets to Jaden von Sanctus, his hopeful son-in-law. However, this was predicated on the condition that Jaden marry the victim's daughter, Leafa. And it's clear that Ms. Leafa will never follow through on this engagement. If this engagement is not made in 6 months, William Frege's assets would be divided among his 3 daughters. I see, so there was no mention of the defendant's disinheritance. Correct, Your Honor. This means that the defendant did have something to gain from the victim's death. Your Honor, despite the confusion around the victim's inheritance, there is still very little physical evidence that implicates my client. May I remind you that Miriam Frege was not telling the truth in yesterday's proceedings? That itself is extremely suspect. And William Frege was clearly not above manipulation and lying. You can't prove that she knowingly gave false testimony. I'll admit that I can't prove that. I'll also admit that there's a lack of apparent physical evidence to substantiate our case. Which is why the prosecution would like to call Harold Haraldson to the stand. Lord Haraldson? The Sword of Spell-Eating clearly plays a large role in the murder, and its theft is one of the few pieces of physical evidence in this case. As the gallery's curator, I believe he can further elaborate on how the sword was stolen that night. More specifically, you can find out about what he did on the night of the murder. I see. Well, the court would definitely benefit from his insight. Bailiff, please escort Lord Haraldson to the stand. Witness, please state your name and occupation for the court. Of course, my name is Harold Haraldson. I am the owner and curator of the Haraldson Hall of History, located in Homperith. Wait, where's the monkey? That's quite the alliterative occupation. Harold, could you please testify to the court about how you discovered that the Sword of Spell Eating was stolen? If it will help. I was keeping an eye on my gallery's exhibits when I realized that my familiar hadn't returned. I called to him telepathically. Excuse me, but he didn't respond. I became worried, so I went around the manor to search for him. About an hour later, I returned to the gallery and discovered that the exhibit that had the Sword of Spell Eating was completely destroyed. The artifact was missing, so I reported the crime to the Knights of the Ball, and they activated a discreet lockdown. Luckily, we found the sword and my familiar later that night. So you went to search for your monkey, and that's why you didn't witness the theft? Yes, the thief was probably waiting for me to leave. They must have wanted to commit the crime without anyone seeing them. Or his testimony is completely full of it. His search for Eugene must have been a cover that he's using to hide his actions that night. So how do you prove that?
Objection!
Whoops. His statement just now is missing some details. But what details should you ask him to elaborate on? How did you eventually find the Sword of Spell Eating? The King's Guard and I slowly and carefully checked each room in the manor. After about an hour, we finally found the artifact under the bed in the defendant's room. That must be where Tracker hides the sticks that he finds. Now that you think about it, he's probably the one who stole Celeste's sword in the first place. Anyways, this detail could be extremely important. Please add it to your testimony, witness. Harold. Yes, of course, Harold. He says that he went around the manor to look for Eugene. Do you think he's telling the truth? Maybe, but his so-called search for Eugene gave him a good excuse to not be seen by anyone. It's a decent alibi, if not without its flaws. You'll just need to poke some holes in that alibi. How did you eventually find Eugene that night? After an hour of silence, you finally responded to my telepathic messages. He met up with me in the gallery before he went to search for the sword. So this would have been after the theft was reported. Yes, he would have had to pick up Eugene after he murdered Lord Frege. Excuse me. This must be the alibi they're using to account for the time that no one could see Eugene. Anyways, this detail could be extremely important. Please add it to your testimony, witness. Harold. Yes, of course, Harold.
Objection!
Harold, you found Eugene before you went to search for the Sword of Spell Eating? This would mean that happened while the lockdown was still active. Am I correct? Yes, as much as I was worried about the artifact, Eugene's safety was far more important. That's the thing, Harold. You said that after hours of silence you finally received a telepathic message back from Eugene. What? So that leaves one question. How did you communicate with Eugene telepathically, if you were both within an anti-magic field? What? Harold, in response to the theft, the King's Guard activated a lockdown system to prevent anyone from leaving. That same lockdown system would have placed an anti-magic field over every inch of that manor. That field should have suppressed the telepathic abilities given to you by familial bond. You wouldn't have been able to speak with Eugene at all. Mr. Cuthbert, are you accusing the witness of lying in his testimony? Please, Cuthbert is blowing his entire thing out of proportion. Anti-magic field is a resource-intensive spell. We can't assume that they managed to cover every inch of the manor, especially the areas that would only be accessible to a small animal. Ms. Tamora, let's assume that Eugene managed to reach some sort of blind spot in the lockdown system. The magical telepathy granted by familial bond connects two people. Even if Eugene wasn't affected by the anti-magic field, Harold would be. That's very true. So how did I hear him that night? There's only one answer that makes sense, Harold. You did hear Eugene telepathically, because Eugene was wielding the sword of spell eating. What? I'm sorry, Mr. Cuthbert, but are you saying that the sword of spell eating was stolen by the witness's pet monkey? I am, Your Honor. It's the only way the witness's testimony makes sense. She doesn't have a rebuttal. You should push this while you still have a chance. Harold Haraldson, you were the one who stole the sword of spell eating, weren't you? And what reason would I have to steal something that already belongs to me? It was to take suspicion off of you, because you were the one who had William Frege killed. You staged a robbery and used the sword of spell eating to make Eugene invisible. Then you sent him through the manor's ventilation system, also you could have him murder William Frege in his study. I don't like that look on her. Well done, Cuthbert. I suppose you just can't stop yourself from pursuing a lying witness. It's what I do best, Ms. Tamora. Of course. Witness, do you have anything to say in your defense? It's quite obvious, but I completely refute the prosecution's allegations. He's misguided, but he's just doing his job. You were expecting his thoughts to be hostile like before. Then do you also refute your statement about Eugene telepathically speaking with you? I know better than to lie on the stand to try to save myself. I can't explain how it happened, but I stand behind my testimony. Eugene did telepathically contact me during the lockdown, but how did he do it? Wait, so he doesn't know how that telepathic communication happened? Perhaps he overlooked it when he was planning the murder with Beatrice. And that's your position, Cuthbert? That the witness sent a monkey to murder William Frege? It may sound ridiculous, but it's the only thing that makes sense. Or do you have any evidence to refute that, Ms. Tamora? No, I fully and wholeheartedly agree with you, Cuthbert. Okay. Wait. Tyrion? Mr. Cuthbert, did you forget that you were prosecuting Beatrice Frege? Your Honor, even as a prosecutor, it's clear that Cuthbert just can't stop himself from finding the true culprit. Wait, I also meant to say that the defendant conspired with the witness to commit the crime. Oh, really? And do you have any proof of this conspiracy to commit? Of course you don't. But even so, but let's assume that you did have evidence to prove your statement. If this was really a plot formed by my client and the witness, what would my client even contribute to this plan? From what you said, this plot was completely carried out by Lord Haraldson and his familiar. Well, the glass. He would have needed a powerful mage like the defendant to break the sword's display case and stage the robbery. So her contribution to the murder was breaking some glass. Can you prove that my client shattered the display case? And can you prove that she did so knowing that it would somehow lead to her father's death? You might have gotten a little too eager to prove Harold's guilt. The physical evidence against my client was almost non-existent in the first place. Meanwhile, it seems the prosecution has just brought forward physical evidence that implicates Lord Haraldson. Physical evidence that is supported by his own testimony. There has to be some explanation for this. Cuthbert, didn't you ask me something yesterday? If my client didn't kill the victim, then who did? I suppose I should thank you for finding the answer. Damn it, all you did was make it more difficult to prove your case. But Harold has to be involved in this. You weren't wrong about that. Only Eugene would be small enough to traverse the air vents. So isn't there anything else you can use? With the threat of indictment, Harold must be stressed. It's gotten you out of tight spots before. Maybe you can find the evidence in his mind. You can use every trick you have, Cuthbert. It won't help you. Ignore her. Calm your mind and focus the eye of Horus on him. You have to find something, anything, that might tie the murder to Beatrice.
Naught can remain concealed.
Oh, Zadium has a very interesting theory. Okay, so... It's truly a shame that Beatrice was driven to flee from her own family. If only I'd introduced myself to her, perhaps we could have found a solution together. He doesn't know Beatrice? But how? She planned the murder with him. Unless... I can't believe that one of my artifacts was used to commit a murder. It's completely disrespectful for the culture and history behind it. What? He's speaking as if he truly had no hand in this. But that can't be true, can it? Eugene, just what were you doing that night? Did you really wield the sword, if only for a brief moment? Wait, you should have known exactly where Eugene was that night. Why would his thoughts say that? What? What's going on? He's speaking as if he really had no hand in this. You can guard yourself from the Eye of Horus, but you can't lie to it. And if that's true, were you wrong about Harold's involvement? Is he really innocent? See anything, Cuthbert? Your Honor, it's clear that the prosecution has nothing left to argue. There's very little evidence implicating my client, and there's a far more likely suspect in front of us right now. Yes, I must agree, Ms. Tamora. At the very least, I see no reason to prolong this trial any longer. Wait! Beatrice couldn't have personally done this. Discounting the fact that she's completely blind, she was with the two princes for most of the night. So who actually killed William Frege in his study? Think about this. The reason why you suspected Harold in the first place was because of what Tracker said. Tracker's vocabulary is primitive and limited. He uses the word rat to describe small creatures that hide and act suspiciously. But even if it wasn't an actual rat, it still couldn't have been human, right? You're right. It would have been a small animal. A small animal with the strength and dexterity to traverse a small air vent while holding a sword. Tracker definitely saw some kind of animal. Was it someone else's familiar? Who did Tracker see in the air vent? Eugene. Right, it had to have been Eugene. Tracker found the sword in that hallway. And Eugene couldn't have communicated with Harold unless the sword protected both of them from the anti-magic field. But why? Did Eugene just happen to be in that hallway? That also doesn't explain why the sword of spell eating was even there. No. Tracker said that Eugene came out of the air vent on one side of the hallway, then he fled into the air vent on the other side. Even for a small monkey, those vents would be extremely cramped. He wouldn't have entered those vents out of mere curiosity. Why was Eugene in the air vents? You know now that Harold didn't participate in the murder, but did he know about what Eugene was doing that night? No, you can't say for sure why Eugene was there, but it's unlikely that Harold even knew about it. No, you can't say for sure why Eugene was there, but it's unlikely that Harold even knew about it. Eugene was acting of his own free will. That's the explanation that makes the most sense. But how? And why? Harold is the only person that is magically connected to Eugene. And even if Beatrice somehow got Eugene to follow her orders, she wouldn't have been able to direct his actions telepathically. Beatrice couldn't use any other conjuration spell to contact him either. She was also in the anti-magic field when she was with Aster. So if Eugene was the one who murdered William Frege, was he acting independently? No, that can't be possible. How could Eugene have carried out this plan independently? This plan required knowledge of Frege Manor's ventilation system. It also involved murdering William during the lockdown and destroying his will. Eugene might be smart for a monkey, but a normal monkey wouldn't have known how to identify and destroy William's will, even if Beatrice had somehow trained him to do all this beforehand. Oh. No, it couldn't be. I discovered that the armbands of intellect had been stolen as well, and unlike the sword of spell eating, we still haven't found the armbands. You look at the glass case where the armbands used to be. The thief didn't shatter the glass. Exactly. Moreover, the armbands were actually replaced with a very well-made replica. the magical locks on the case can be disabled. How are they normally disabled? They can be turned on and off using a spoken password. How many people know this password? Only myself. I personally oversee the transport of these items when they're moved. Only Harold knows the password, but someone could have overheard him saying that. Someone that's constantly looking over his shoulder. You've made some ridiculous statements in the past, but there's no way the judge will even entertain this theory. You'll have to be smart about this. Your Honor, I think there's one more witness that can clear up this discrepancy once and for all. I believe he can prove the prosecution's case to the court. Really, I frankly find that hard to believe. Please trust me, Your Honor. There's an element to this that we all aren't seeing, and it's one that no one will believe. What do you have planned now? Very well. I'll give you one last chance, Mr. Cuthbert. But know that if your next witness fails to unveil any new information, I won't hesitate to end this trial. I understand, Your Honor. So I'm going to need you to bear with me for a moment. He's going to put a monkey on the stand. Why? Your Honor, the defense calls Eugene Haroldson to the stand. Never mind, I retract my earlier statement. I'll be passing my verdict. Wait, just bear with me for a moment. Mr. Cuthbert, I should find you in contempt for even suggesting this. Do you honestly think I'll allow a monkey to do testimony in my courtroom? Yeah, it sounds pretty out there, even for us. I'd like to remind the court of the nature of Harold's bond with Eugene. Eugene is a familiar. This means that Harold Haroldson can speak with him telepathically. But this is absolutely... Show me the law that says an animal can't give testimony, Your Honor. It's not in the rule book. A monkey can give testimony. A dog can play baseball. It may be unprecedented, but it's not against the law. Very well. Your Honor, you can't be serious right now. Are you actually going along with this? Oh, Ms. Tamura, I am looking for any possible reason not to entertain this. But Mr. Cuthbert has a point. There are no laws against his proposal. So I have no choice but to oblige his frankly insane actions for now. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It's not as if this will reveal anything. I can't believe I'm saying this, but... Bailiff, please escort Lord Haroldson's monkey to the stand. Witness, please state your name and occupation to the court. I could do without the sarcasm, Ms. Tamura. Eugene is Eugene! Eugene Monk! Bailiff, make sure the stenographer gets Haroldson's translations. Ugh. You can't see the armbands on him right now. He must be at his normal intelligence now. Although, how would he even wear them? Perhaps he held them in his hands. They only require physical contact after all. Eugene, did you steal from the gallery on the night of the murder? Eugene never steal from Harold. Eugene respect Harold. Then you'll have no problem testifying about where you went during the Lord's ball. I can't believe I let you convince me to permit this. Eugene explore house. Eugene look for new place to play. Eugene also look for spiders. Spiders yum yum. Look, you think Eugene steal armbands of intellect? Look, Eugene never steal from Harold. Harold friend. Look, Eugene always Harold's friends. Apes strong together. Wow, you did it, Cuthbert. You blew this case wide open. Is this really going to help us? Look, you'll just have to trust me on this. I trust you? That sentence sounds like it turned into a question at the end.
Objection!
Wait a minute. Eugene, I asked you before if you stole anything from Harold's gallery. Eugene, no. Eugene would never steal from Harold. Cuthbert, don't waste our time by having him repeat that statement. That's the thing, Ms. Tamura. That's not the same statement he made in his testimony. I asked the witness if he stole an artifact from the gallery. I never mentioned the armbands of intellect. Look! What are you talking about now? The witness lacks the understanding to differentiate between the artifacts. If it was clearly just a simple mistake. It's not just the fact that he named the wrong artifact, Ms. Tamora. It's the fact that he used its actual name. I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean, Mr. Cuthbert. Your Honor, animals can't speak the same way that humans do. Even when a telepathic link is established, their vocabulary is extremely limited. Right, Tracker called the sort of spell eating a stick before. It was hard to understand what he really meant. Exactly. So that raises the question, how did Eugene know they were called the armbands of intellect? Wait, how did he know? The armbands were stolen during the Lord's Ball and replaced with a well-made replica. Where are the armbands of intellect right now? If he had worn the armbands when he was sneaking through the vents, he would have never had the opportunity to put them back. And the armbands are still missing. It can't be. Is he really? The armbands were designed to be worn by humans, so Eugene couldn't wear them on his arms. So where would he wear them? You initially thought that he carried them in his hands, but there's a far simpler explanation. Eugene, do you still maintain that you didn't steal the armbands of intellect? Eugene told you already. Eugene never steal from Harold. Then I suppose you wouldn't mind taking off of your hat. Oh. Are you serious right now? You don't think he's wearing them right now, do you? It's the only thing that makes sense. The armbands were taken on the night of the murder, and they are still missing. If Eugene did indeed steal the armbands that night, he would have never had the opportunity to return them. He had no choice but to continue wearing them until the investigation was over. This is absolutely ridiculous. You're spinning a fairy tale. Do you honestly expect us to believe that a monkey increased its intellect beyond human limits? If I'm wrong, the witness can easily refute my theory by removing his hat. Well, what's it going to be, Eugene? You see him fully break character, and he slowly but silently lifts his hat. No, you can't be serious. Everyone can see it plainly. He's wearing the armbands like a crown around his tiny head. From out of his hat, you see him pull out something else. Well done, Mr. Cuthbert. I shouldn't have underestimated you. Ah! You? Serious? This is probably a blessing in disguise. I don't think I could bear debasing myself any longer.
Objection!
Objection, Your Honor! On what grounds, Ms. Tamora? On what grounds? Everything about this situation is objectionable. It's downright absurd. Is he seriously Beatrice's accomplice? But Ms. Tamora, we can't deny what's clearly in front of us. I was not ready for today. How is he even talking right now? Scholars believe that humans and apes evolved from a common ancestor. Perhaps all apes can speak the common language under the right circumstances. Evolved, please. I've observed your society. I think calling humanity evolved is being quite generous. This can't be happening. Well, are you all done gawking at me like a bunch of simpletons? Simpletons? Wait a minute! It's quite difficult to separate myths from actual historical accounts. Right. I remember encountering a similar problem at the Imperial Academy. Ah, you must be quite dedicated to your studies. They let this simpleton into the Imperial Academy? Oh my god! He was picking up Eugene's thoughts, not Harold's. Rude, but you suppose that can't be helped. Every insulting thought that you've seen from Harold, they weren't Harold's thoughts at all. They were Eugene's thoughts. He's been wearing the armbands since you first met. But I still don't understand. Why would you even take the armbands in the first place? I'll admit that the Lord's Ball was one of many occasions. The first time I touched them was due to sheer chance. You put them on by accident? My unawakened self was enamored by its glittering sheen. I merely wanted to touch them, but when I first held them in my hands, I experienced a sense of clarity that I'd never felt before. I was afraid of what I'd experienced, so I left them alone. But as I returned to my primitive lifestyle, I couldn't stop thinking about what I felt that day. You were hooked. I wouldn't quite phrase it like that, but I suppose you're not wrong. I already knew the password to Harold's vault, so I'd come in from time to time and indulge in the armband's power. But the more time I spent with my awakened intellect, the more I craved its power when I had to put them away. And that's when you made the replica. While no one was watching, I devised a plan to discreetly take the armbands. Harold would have eventually discovered that they were stolen, but he would have concluded that a noble from the Lord's Ball took them, because of the pressure that he was receiving from the crown. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I never expected things to reach this point. I didn't expect someone to steal the sword of spell-eating as well. And I certainly didn't expect a murder to happen that night. So you still maintain that you're innocent? Of course I do. I stole the armbands, but I did not murder William Frege, nor did I take the sword of spell-eating. Allow me to elaborate. I'll admit that I took the armbands and replaced them with a replica, but I was not the crook who stole the sword of spell-eating. The thefts were completely different from one another. The display case for the sword was completely shattered. I spotted the sword when I was exploring the manor. It was lying in the middle of a hallway. I wondered why such an important artifact would be lying there. So I took a closer look to inspect it. That's when I heard Harold call out to me telepathically. The sword must have protected me and Harold from the anti-magic field. I wanted to take the sword and return it, but a wild dog chased me away from the scene. He has a point. He didn't need to shatter the display case of the sword. Yeah, he already knew the passwords. But Tracker said that Eugene was the one who dropped the sword. Furthermore, he escaped into the air vent that led into William's study. His actions that night were definitely not as innocent as his testimony implies. He must have lied somewhere. But that location was near the Frege's bedrooms. Don't tell me that you... What do you take me for? I know what a bedroom looks like, and I'd never enter one uninvited. Then why were you there in the first place? I was coming back from the rooftop garden, but I suddenly felt something interfering with the armband's magic. The anti-magic fields. Yes, I was worried that something had happened, so I made my way back to the gallery to meet up with Harold. I see. Could you add this to your testimony? Very well.
Objection!
Eugene, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but the best way to lie is to hide a false detail within many truths. And what are you trying to insinuate, Mr. Cuthbert? You said that you were heading from the terrace to the gallery. Did you take any detours? Of course not. With the armbands nullified, my intelligence was slowly fading. I wanted to return to Harold as soon as possible. Witness, I'd like for you to take a look at this floor map of Frege Manor. This is the location where that wild dog found the sword of spell-eating. So tell me, Eugene, how did you spot the sword of spell-eating when it was hidden in the hallway north of Beatrice's room? That's... Why are you nitpicking such an insignificant statement? He probably just got distracted and went down the wrong hallway. Ms. Tamora, Eugene came from the rooftop garden, and he was adamant that he went directly to the gallery to reunite with Harold. Even if his intellect was muddled, he was intent on reuniting with his worried companion. He definitely took the direct route, but if he did, he never would have been able to see in that hallway. I see your point, Mr. Cuthbert, but what does this mean? It means that the witness lied about where he was before he discovered the Sword of Spell Eating. He wasn't coming from the rooftop garden. He came from the air vents in that specific hallway. So why were you in that hallway, Eugene? You lied in your testimony. Was it because you wanted to hide what you were really doing that night? Admit it, Eugene. You snuck through the air vents to avoid detection. Then you used the air vent in that hallway to break into William's study. After that, you murdered him using his letter opener, didn't you? That's not what I went there to do! No, I didn't mean... Order in the court! Witness, is this true? Did you break into William Frega's study during the lockdown? Yes, I did enter his study, but not for the reason you think. William Frega was already dead when I got there. What? What did you just say? It's true. Do you honestly expect us to believe a story like that? How could someone else have killed the victim before you got there? Tracker took the Sword of Spell Eating, and you were the only intelligent creature that could walk through the air vents. I understand how unbelievable and suspicious it sounds. Why do you think I lied in the first place? But it's the truth, Mr. Cuthbert. You have to believe me. You don't see any contradicting thoughts through the eye, but that hardly absolves him of guilt. But could he really be telling the truth? If that's true, that only brings you back to the one question you've been asking since this all began. Who really did this? Okay, Eugene. Let's assume you're telling the truth. Do you actually believe me? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're still my only suspect for this. But I know better than anyone about jumping to conclusions. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for now. I see. However, if you want to absolve yourself, I need you to tell me about what you really saw that night. There might be something, anything that might point to who really did this. Very well. I'll tell you what I saw. Although I doubt you'll believe me. I discreetly made my way to that hallway through another air vent. I exited the air vent in that hallway and tried to leap to the other side. I'm not sure if it was my waning intelligence or my desperation, but I collided with something that I didn't see. I fell to the ground and found the Sword of Spell Eating laying next to me. I wanted to retrieve the sword, but that wild dog forced me to retreat. After that, I continued to make my way to the study. And that's when I found William Frega. He was dead on the floor and lying in a pool of blood. And as if I were blessed by the Scaled Lord himself, I found the will that he was drafting. So I destroyed it. Frankly, Mr. Haraldson, I find that story very difficult to believe. I assumed as much, but you know what they say. Truth is stranger than fiction. Isn't it more likely that you murdered the victim? You're clearly trying to cover up what you did by saying he was already dead. Honestly, I really don't know what to think. Is he really telling the truth?
Objection!
Oh, that didn't work. How did you know it was the Sword of Spell Eating? When I held it in my hands, I felt my intelligence return. But I also heard Harold calling out to me telepathically. He was clearly growing worried, so I knew I needed to move quickly.
Objection! Objection!
Wait, what? I don't think this is working right. I'm just basically press on number 2. I thought monkeys were extremely dexterous. Are you just clumsy? I have impeccable dexterity. It sounds like you struck a nerve there. I must have been muddled from losing the armband's magic.
Objection!
But why were you there in the first place? It all began when William Frege got into an argument with Harold. That cur wanted to defund the prestigious Harrodson Hall of History. I knew a man like William probably had many secrets, so I devised a plan to break into his study and find something that I could use to blackmail him. As you know, there's a small air vent in that hallway and connected to William's study on the ground floor. I wasn't aware that William was planning to stay in his study all night, so I thought I could look through his documents without anyone seeing me. You suppose that does make sense, but is he really telling the truth? What happened when you tried to leap to the other air vent, Eugene? I thought monkeys... I already got that. Did this wild dog have a white coat of fur? He did. Are you acquainted with him? Something like that. Well, next time you meet him, tell him that I don't appreciate being called a rat. I am a proud orangutan. You can understand him? I've picked up a little of the canine language throughout my life. I'm also fluent in squirrel and pigeon. I can also speak owl, but I admit it's barely conversational. As much as you want to test the validity of those claims, they're not relevant to the case. What happened when you entered the study? It seems awfully convenient that he was murdered before you arrived. I know how it may seem, but I'm telling you the truth. And do you have an explanation for how the assailant broke into the study without the sword? I, unfortunately, do not. Please, it's obvious your testimony doesn't match up with the evidence. Whoever did this either entered through the vents or they used the sword to nullify the lock. And your own testimony states that the sword was abandoned in that hallway. It doesn't match up with what you thought happened, but does it really contradict the evidence you have? Anyways, what did you do when you discovered the body? I knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered the body, so I quickly searched the room for something I could use. So you were the one who took the will. I've been trying to find it. What did it say? I was pressed for time, so I didn't read the entire document. But I found an order to his executor to defund the Harrodson Hall of History. Since he went out of his way to specify that on the current copy, I concluded that his former will didn't have this addendum. So you could save Harold's museum by making sure it never got submitted for probate. Anyways, do you have the will with you? My apologies, I crumpled up the will into a ball and ate it. I then left the room before my intelligence was completely gone. Ugh. You were really hoping to see if William followed through on his threat to disinherit Beatrice. It's hard to believe, but you can't see any direct contradictions. Should you press him more? But what if he's telling the truth? If Eugene did do this, your next course of action is clear. Although, that still wouldn't explain how Beatrice fits into this. You recall something that Tracker said to you. Tracker, you said that you had to smell to see where the rat was? And when he dropped his stick, you were finally able to see him. Does this mean you couldn't visually see him before he fell down? Yeah, Tracker couldn't see the rat with his eyes, so Tracker used his nose to see it. Eugene was invisible. Eugene, when you were carrying out your plan, did you turn yourself invisible somehow? No, I hardly had the means to. And even if I had somehow convinced Harold to cast a spell on me, he doesn't know how to cast invisibility. Very few mages do. Right, you recall Eris saying the same thing during the Nightgrave trials. Only a master of illusion magic could do that. That's how you first thought Beatrice was involved. But if Eugene is truly innocent, did she turn someone else invisible? But if that's true, you're back right where you started again. No, think through this. Eugene's testimony fills in a blank that's been missing. I fell to the ground and found the sword of spell-eating laying next to me. How did you know it was the sword of spell-eating? When I held it in my hands, I felt my intelligence return. But I also heard Harold calling out to me telepathically. He was clearly growing worried, so I knew that I needed to move quickly. I wanted to retrieve the sword, but that wild dog forced me to retreat. After that, I continued to make my way to the study. And what happens when you cross-reference that with Tracker's testimony? That's when Tracker smelled flying rat. Tracker could smell where Rat was, so Tracker borked at him. Tracker must have scared Rat, because he fell onto the floor and dropped his stick. How did the sword of spell-eating end up in that hallway? So where does that lead us? The thief dropped the sword in that hallway. But how does that make sense? Did they hide the sword there like you originally thought? No, that hallway was close to the gallery. There were plenty of better places to hide the sword. If it weren't for Tracker taking it, it would have been found even sooner. The thief must have accidentally dropped the sword there. This can only mean one thing. Why was the thief in that hallway? The thief was also sneaking through the air vents. That's the only reason why they would be there. But that would imply that the thief was as small as Eugene. Could it have been another familiar? And if so, why didn't Eugene notice them? Wait. I'm not sure if it was my waning intelligence or my desperation, but I collided with something that I didn't see. He collided with something he didn't see. In other words, it was something that was invisible to him. And as a master of illusion magic, Beatrice is one of the few people at the ball that could cast invisibility. Beatrice would never trust anyone enough to work together like this. But she's completely blind. She wouldn't have much of a choice. Even so, she's not the type of person to trust her accomplice to stay quiet. She'd find a way to carry out a plan herself, and she'd only employ someone else's help if she had full control of them. Have you been approaching this situation incorrectly the entire time? Through the eye, you knew that Beatrice was involved somehow, but you just assumed that she was one part of a larger plot. The breaking of the glass and the casting of invisibility. These were the elements that you knew she was involved with, but it never really fit together. Not unless she was the one pulling the strings the entire time. And there's only one way she could be in control the entire time. What did Beatrice use to commit the murder? A couple of memories flood into your mind. A familiar is a creature that a mage has formed a magical contract with. With that contract, our souls are bonded. I can speak with him telepathically. I could even see through his eyes and cast my spells through him if I wanted to. Really, I never knew a spell like that existed. It's quite rare. Very few mages take the time to learn how to cast it. Hi, I'm Tyrion Cuthbert. I'm Ms. Tamora's ward. You extend out your hand to shake hers. She has an aristocratic air to her, so you hope you're not being too informal. Instead of taking your hand, she claps her hands together and takes a deep breath. What? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. It's a bit of a habit of mine. Oh. Nevertheless, she finally shakes your hand. I've heard much about you, Mr. Cuthbert. My name is Beatrice. You didn't know that she was blind back then, so you barely even noticed it. But how did she know that you were holding out your hand? Well, do you have any other questions for me? If you're wrong about this, Beatrice will surely be acquitted. And after that, the Inquisition will turn their attention to Harold and Eugene. But there's only one way to know for sure. Your Honor, the prosecution has no further questions for the current witness. He is dismissed. What? I see. You have something else planned, don't you? Yeah, and I actually need your help. Really? You tell her about your plan. Really? I feel like you're making some big assumptions there. Wouldn't the Inquisition check for something like that? I know. It's the best play we have. Do you remember what Steelwind said yesterday? But the moment the guards saw the body, one of them cast Detect Magic. With that spell, they would have seen any invisible people hiding in this room. Wait, you can use Detect Magic like that? Of course. It's standard procedure. Like all spells, invisibility leaves traces of magic on the person it's cast on. So mages can use Detect Magic as a way to see through invisibility. If everything goes the way I think it will, you'll be able to confirm its location. Once you do that, you just need to reveal it to everyone. All right, I'll follow your lead then. So, Mr. Cuthbert, how do we proceed? Your previous witness brought about more revelations than I could have ever guessed. However, you still haven't given a substantial explanation about how the murder occurred or who actually did it. I understand that, Your Honor, but it will all make sense after I call my next witness. Another witness. I understand your hesitance, Your Honor, but everything that we've learned throughout these trials is finally coming together. And this final witness will tie it all together in a perfect knot. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Beatrice Frege to the stand. Seriously, Cuthbert? You went to all that trouble just to end up calling my client to the stand? You and your client have the right to refuse Ms. Tamora, but I wonder how that will reflect on your client's character. It doesn't really matter. She's already standing here with Ms. Tamora. You can carry out your plan regardless of what she decides to do, but it will have much more impact if you can bait her into lying on the stand. My client says that she's willing to testify. However, we would like to propose a short recess. With these new developments, I'm sure you can understand that we have much to discuss. I see no reason not to grant the defense's request. Is this really okay? If we give them time to prep, they might realize what we're doing. I know, but I don't think we have anything to worry about. You've been building a psychological profile of Beatrice since this case began. It's hard to read her expression and emotions, even with the Eye of Horus. She keeps herself guarded and keeps her true intentions unknown. She's powerful, more powerful than her father ever cared to admit. Despite this, he tried to control her and put her inside a cage. But Beatrice Frege would never live in a cage. She wanted freedom and control, and she would do whatever it took to get it. You're sure the accident that blinded her didn't help things? When everything was said and done, she abandoned everything. Her wealth, her status, her family. She could have waited. She could have gritted her teeth until it was her turn to lead House Frege. If she was willing, she could have even secretly pushed her father past the gates of death herself. But she couldn't bear to live like that, even temporarily. You have no idea why this is how she chose to do that. Perhaps it had something to do with their meeting. But you do know one thing. Beatrice Frege will never put herself in a position of vulnerability. If you endanger her freedom, she will make sure that she can see who she's up against. In the interest of giving the defense time to deliberate, we will be taking an extended recess. Court is adjourned. As you were exiting the courtroom, you sent Celeste to do some reconnaissance. It should be similar to when she scanned Valentina during the Nightgrave trial. Tyrion. Celeste, were you able to see it? Yeah, it's definitely there, and it sits on her shoulder most of the time. Another familiar. So she keeps it close to her. That's good to know. It looks kind of weird though, but I've never used detect magic like this before. Well, you doubt that someone like her would choose a conventional animal, especially for something like this. Cuthbert. Ms. Tamora. There's something I need to show you. Preferably alone. Celeste gives you a concerned look, but you nod to show her it's okay. She moves to sit on the bench where she can keep an eye on Beatrice. Okay, lead the way. Alright, well, it's Okay, it's 5 minutes to 10, and unfortunately, I think we're going to have to end things off for the night. But we've gotten an interesting possibility to look at. The existence of yet another familiar, one that can keep itself hidden. So, anyway, let's see who is streaming, and we can give them a raid. Hold on. Let's see. Da da da. Ba ba da. Doodly doo. Ba doo ba doo. Okay. We are going to raid Shellshock Prime, our dear friend. And we're going to pick up where we left off on Thursday. And hopefully this weekend we can start on a Kuso game. Anyways, that has been myself with Molly and George Washing Machine. And until we meet again, may all of your tea times be perfect.